First coming live from the podcast, this is Tom Vecchia for the New Theory podcast. Doing a special one today where we're doing a live video, which we very rarely do. And we also having repeat guests, which I think we've had really none repeat guests on the show. If anything, we might have one. And this person is John Alite. He's known as being the enforcer for the Gambino family and the Gottis. His first book, Gotti's Rules, is a New York Times bestseller, and now recently came out with John Alite's Darkest Hour, former mafia enforcer for John Gotti and the Gambino crime family. John, how you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks, man.
So thanks for driving up from Philly. So with that said, let's start off. So first, let's talk about, because some people, our first video did about 250,000 views. So some people kind of know who you are, some people don't. So give us your formative years, and what makes you you, and how did you get here? How did you get to this point?
Well, this book is by Susan Pike, by the way, this is kind of really what shows what my life was about, and it talks about what it was about. The first book, Gotti's Rules, was while I was already involved with the Gotti family and some of the violence I was involved with and things like that.
Prequel.
Yeah, it was a prequel, and this is going to go back to a trilogy, and it's going to talk about, this first book is going to go from my infancy and how I grew up, and then you know the basics, and for the people to know is really how I became so violent and what happened in my life. And this book is going to go through some of those things.
Well, what are some of those things?
Well, I was at age 3, I was already in a basement fighting. That was something my father forced on me and my brother at the time. And my group of friends, that actually a lot of these guys are still my childhood friends, are still friends with me, and they know the same stuff that was going on with my brother and me. They were around for, they were down the basement, not like we were every day, but enough that they seen that our training in life was to be fighters, not to be bullied, not to allow anybody to bully us. So really that's what my father said.
What was the origin from that? Was it immigrant families that got picked on? Was it maybe they got shut down by the mob? Like, what was the why? Because don't get me wrong, that's important to understand. But I want to know, that's where your father's at, right? What was the why behind it? Why do you think he was like that with you?
Well, because we were Albanian, and we came from a country that was suppressed. And the heroes in Albania are guys like, you hear us talking about, I have a tattoo on my back of Skanda Beg. And that, to our country, when you fight back and you're suppressed, people look at you as a hero and as a winner.
Got it.
So it's not whether you win or lose, and eventually, obviously, Skanda Beg gets killed, but he didn't succumb to anybody taking advantage of him. And I think that's what resonates with my culture, that I won't bow down to anybody. I'm a guy that's Albanian that got involved in the mafia family and the mafia world, which all Italians, and I survived, and I'm still surviving. I says, if you place one of these guys, especially a guy like the Gottis, because they're very verbal,
maybe in
my culture in Albania, and I don't think he'll last 1 week if I give him that long. So you can't go by talking, you got to go by actions, and I was aggressive.
Okay, so this is important. Okay, so we're painting the picture of culturally suppressed culture, kind of fighting back. Now, 3 years old, what are some other stuff? What are some challenges? Because let's just cards on the table here. For you to did what you did for the Gambinos, might have been business, but you can't be 100% okay to do that. Let's call it what it is, right? That have been something that laid the groundwork to make it okay. So what are some other things that happened that kind of made you into a shooter?
Well, one of the biggest things I talk about is the Catholic Church and being molested as a kid. I mean, when you're molested as a child, and like me and some of my friends, I guess there's anger issues, and I guess there's things that you're going to learn.
How old were you?
About 10 years old.
Wow. And I know John for a number of years. We never talked about this.
No.
Nor was this in your first book.
No, it was discussed when I went in and I spoke to different agencies. It was discussed years ago. I'm not sure how often it came out. It came out through my therapy and some of the things that went on years ago. And most recently, because we're diving into my childhood and what brought it up, just what you asked. So we talk about exactly who covered it up, what priest was involved, what people involved with the church allowed it to go on.
When you were in the life, did you think of going back and just killing them or killing the people responsible?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when I was starting to get very aggressive in this life, I had friends that went back after this priest, and they're not street guys. They were just nice guys. And I asked them to go with them, and they didn't want to let me because they knew I'd kill them.
Yeah.
So they end up baseball batting them and not telling me that the day they were going. Yeah. We met, and I asked to go with them, and they were scheduling something.
Wow.
But they end up doing it without me, believe it or not. And the thing about it is, these guys aren't street guys. They're nice guys. But when you get molested, and you get some of my friends were raped, and it's something that you're never going to recover from. I'm just out advocating for anti-bullying and things like this. So I started, being open and trying to encourage kids that have been molested or raped, and not necessarily by a priest, by anybody, to come forward, and some of the parents that don't know where to go with this.
Well, let me ask this, Sean. So I've got to forgive you and take it back a little bit, because although you didn't do a lot of nice things throughout your life, nobody deserves that at any age or any time, no matter what they did or what they do. However, though, you have enough to share without sharing that. So why drop that bomb? I mean, you didn't need to. Like, you were with the mob, you earned money. You have the Albania back. There's so many different angles. You didn't need to talk about it. Why talk about it? I mean, that's actually a positive thing.
Well, I want to say something. If you open this book, right, and if you show somebody this book and you say, well, you can only read this part of my life, and you can't read this half of my life, and you're not honest, right, and you don't come forward and you're not talking about everything fully open, like whether me and you are friends and we start talking. But if I hold things back, how am I going to help that next kid? And really, my life's at a different point in my life. Sure. I hate to use the word I found God, but I found faith. I found the strength not to be physical, but to go out and shoulder some of the stuff that I did and some of the things that happened to me. And to do both, I need to be able to be honest, so a next kid comes forward, or a next lady, or woman, or a young adult, and any of those people in any position they're in, they got to be able to come forward and not be embarrassed, feel ashamed, or blame themselves for what happened. So I shoulder what I did myself, and I say I lived a wrong life. I can't go backwards. I can only go forwards, right? But I also got to be able to tell kids, listen, you can be me. You can be honest. You could say that these things happen. You could say you cry. You can say, you got to, just open up your house and your windows and let people look in, so other people say, this ain't that bad. I can be honest, and I don't need to be ashamed of things that happen in my life, and move forward. Go to therapy and whatever you need. But when people accuse you, or you hear it a lot about women that have been raped, and they accuse them as being the one, it's their fault, they dress provocative, or they shouldn't have been somewhere, or they shouldn't have been drunk. I mean, it's crazy talk. That's nonsense. It's not somebody's fault when somebody else is taking advantage of a situation. So, now that, I'm out here like this, I think my job is, and I've said it over and over, I took lives before. Now I'm trying to save some lives. And if I can help save one or two, and those one or two can help save one or two, at least we're going in the right direction.
All right, so I want to filter this correctly. So you obviously had a really, really tough childhood. You grew up in Queens, probably a rough neighborhood, let's just assume that. And then, but, kind of in high school, you look a good kid. You had like a baseball scholarship. You were starting, you were your friends, you're handsome now, you're probably not good looking back then. So things were cooking. So why, walk us through that. And then when was your first interaction to the mob life?
Well, in the book, again, go back to my interaction with the mob was since I'm a kid. My whole family was involved. My father had friends with gangsters. My uncle was involved, in the sports business and the card game business. My other uncle was a shooter for, Detroit people. I had an uncle great uncle that was my grandfather's friend that was around gangsters back in, from.
And were these people you looked up to or feared, or both?
The people that were involved?
So you're a young kid growing up, and you saw these guys with Cadillacs and probably suits and kind of hanging out, not working. Were these people, again, were you scared of them, or did you?
No, I don't think I scared them. I just was scared of them. I just think I looked at them as a kid because they were pleasant to me. They were always friendly, and they were always, nice to me. They were always throwing around money. So I seen a lot of all the good things about the world, but I didn't see the underlayers. And that's what most kids don't see, is the underlayers. But I was exposed to them in every aspect of my life, which drew me to it. And as I got involved in the life, and then, the people that are watching movies and see this stuff are like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
But it isn't, because they're not the ones laying their head on a pillow at night and, and not suffering through some of the things that life causes you to suffer through.
So you got hooked up with the mob. Let's call it what it is. And again, we can read about it in the book. But what were some of your first things you had to do to prove yourself?
Well, as a kid, you looking to prove yourself. Yeah. It's not really so much that if you were my boss, or if you're one of the guys calling the shots, you don't really have to ask me to do much. I'm looking to volunteer to do a lot, because I want to be part of that. I want to be ingratiated. So to be ingratiated, you want to show you can make money. You want to show the things that everybody knows that the mob world. So you want to be able to dress the part. You want to be able to look the part. You want to be able to carry yourself. You want to be able to go with your hands. You want to be a shooter, and you want to be an earner. So I learned to be all those things.
Well, you were bald, and I don't claim to have that much of mob knowledge outside of what's public. But with that said, as I understand, there's shooters and there's earners. You were bald. What's a shooter do? What's an earner do? And how are you the few that was bald?
Well, one of the things I did that most guys didn't do, they wore masks. Yeah. I never wore masks. I used to tell everybody, I want them to know it's me. I want them to be afraid to go to the law. Yeah. I want them to be afraid to tell somebody it was me. Yeah. But yet, by me going face up, that's my wallet. I used to say the same thing on different parts of my life, times of my life. I'd say, my wallet was my face. Yeah. So I didn't need to carry a wallet. Yeah. And, when people saw me, they knew they were either going to pay or I'm going to take it. Yeah. And, that was my disposition in those days, is to take what I wanted and to be an aggressive gangster, and I became that. Okay, so you were the heavy, right? And then how did you become an earner? What are some of the business perspective? What are some of the line of businesses you were in, and how did you make money? Well, I learned to put that illegal money into legal money. So I started opening up nightclubs. I had some very well-known clubs. I had one of them, American Cowboy, which was a country place down in Florida that did very well, and there was one here in Jersey. So, I was a silent partner. I'd put up the money on the background. I owned glass companies. I owned parking companies. So you took illegal money to make it legal, but then... I also tried to stay in cash businesses. So, correct, so you could funnel my money. What type of money were you making? What, gross per year or a week or a month? Like, what were you making? I was making millions. So, we had a nightclub that was making about $3 million a year. In every angle of that club, we had a parking company that was making millions a year. Yeah. Those are all businesses that cash, and I'm funneling it back into the drug business at the same time, and the loan sharking business at the same time, my bookmaking businesses. You were an associate, correct? Yeah. So now, did you give money to them each day, each week, each month, as part of for their protection, or how did that work? Listen, when I was young, I always bit into that, but I was their protection. So I started saying to myself, as I'm getting older, making this money, why am I partners with Gotti for? Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, without a doubt, the father's that name, and that name does help. Yeah. But then as I have my own name, and I'm violent, and I'm a big earner. Yeah. And when they need things, they're asking me, can you go see that guy, hurt that guy, collect from that guy, shoot this guy, kill that guy? Yeah. So I step back as now I'm a smarter guy. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm, what am I helping these people for? They don't earn, I do. They don't hurt, I do. They don't kill, I do. So I'm saying, these guys are useless. I got the crew. I got these guys on the street that are answering to me. I got all the guys that are from the streets. They got suit and ties that are useless. So 1985, I think December 15th, Paul Castellano gets killed. Where were you, and what did it mean to you after he got killed? Because you were associated with the Gottis. So what happened before and what happened after, and how did that benefit you? Well, did it take a minute to benefit you? Well, once Paul gets killed, I believe it was the 16th, actually. But when he gets killed, I'm having dinner with another mob associate that was a well-known guy for the Lucchese family that was a hitman himself, and he was a guy that was aggressive since he's a kid. And we're eating dinner, and we knew what was going to happen. What do hitmen talk about at dinner? I got to tell you, he taught me how to, nice guy, and he taught me how to be aggressive but quiet. Oh, okay. And, as a young kid, that's what he talked to me about. Well, he would talk about these things like you would talk about baseball. Yeah. He'd give me advice how to behave. Yeah. And even as a young guy, he would down the Gottis. He didn't like them. Yeah. He said, they're too boisterous. Yeah. They're bad for you. I know it's going to end up, biting you in the ass eventually. And, he was right. And guys, that are in the life, the old timers, they foresee this stuff.
Yeah.
Because, in this life, you got to be,
it's
like you got to be quiet. You can't be loud and boisterous. It's the worst thing you can do for yourself to draw attention to yourself. So these are the things he discussed with me.
Okay, so back to Gotti. So Paul Castellano gets murdered. The Gotti regime comes into play, I guess a few months after. What did that mean for John Alite?
Well, I was close to the Gotti family. So supposedly it meant for me that I was going to start making a lot more money.
No.
And that never happened. Not on their end. They didn't help me make any more money. So what I saw was the first real part of that I was looking at was...
First crack in the armor.
Yeah, it was the first time that I really seen exactly what you're saying, is they're full of shit.
Yeah.
That they're not going to share the wealth.
Yeah.
They're going to ask me after the hit of Castellano to bring as many guys as I got, keep them on call, and bring guns to our club, which we weren't allowed to do. And so I started carrying more often.
They assume afterwards there's going
to be retaliation.
Okay.
Yeah. And, within the family, we didn't think there was going to be retaliation. It was an elderly family, the Gambino family, that faction that was around Paul. So there was nobody really left to do any work for any kind of faction that was going to come back at us. And the faction, the younger guys, which Sammy Gravano and Frankie Locasio and Frankie DeChico were all in on it. So these guys controlled the crews from Staten Island, Brooklyn to the Bronx. So really, within our family, there wasn't going to be any fallback. Yeah. But outside other crews, we knew the Lucchese family especially, and we knew the Genovese family weren't going to put up with it. And exactly that, they didn't put up with it.
Now, as I understand it, again, just by reading, is that Paul Castellano was more of a business guy, and he wanted to bring it to a whole other level, kind of indoctrinate it into the fabric of society, where John Gotti was a gangster's gangster, where more people ate or they ate better because he took less and wanted his guys to eat. It goes a little bit against kind of what you're saying, where, hey, I didn't eat that great under Gotti, but would you say people ate better or more under Gotti than they did under Castellano?
No, that's laughable. I mean, that's selling that story to a 17-year-old kid.
Got it.
When Paul was in and led the family, did Paul have most of that money in his pocket? I don't know. I wasn't there when they divvied that money up. Was the family wealthier? About 10 times wealthier under Paul Castellano, the Gambino family.
I was told at the time in the 80s, no, not in the 80s, the 70s, the family was bringing in around $450 million a year, and it was cash on relative terms, may have been bigger than GM at the time. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's a fair statement. And you got to remember something. Paul, Carlo Gambino, these guys were businessmen. They were intelligent. Carlo's no dummy that
died in his bed.
Right, that knew when he was handing over the power of any corporation, legitimate corporation, is money, right?
Correct.
And it is somebody that's smart, that could head a family and be a CEO of a company, just like of a mob family. Yeah. And Paul was that guy. And when someone says Paul wasn't a gangster, he was a gangster. He hit more guys than most guys. He didn't personally go out and hit them, but either did John Gotti Sr. Yeah. John Gotti Sr. didn't go out and hit anybody. Either did Paul. Did he talk that talk? Yeah, he did talk that talk. Was he rough around the edges? Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're a leader. That means you're just a guy that would have been probably a good leader for a street gang, but not for a crime family. Paul Castellano was a crime family boss. Okay. And when I hear this, that it's not, they're not getting proper information. If you go back and see how many guys Paul had hit while he was reigning as the boss of the Gambino family, you'll see that it's accurate that Paul hit more guys.
Okay, so what I want to ask you is, okay, so we're in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, you're making some money, you're with the Gottis. Now, I have to tell you, John, and I got to be very fair, and I am friends with John, but also I have a right and an obligation to the audience in your theory, which is growing. But I had you on last time and I got a lot of shit. And I don't want to bullshit you, right? The first allegation is that you never knew John Gotti Sr. Just
hey, if we want to do a comedy show, I says I'll be willing to talk about. Okay, let's go into that. Yeah. Because if you watch the A&E tape, Gotti Sr., not that is any big deal that I'm around Gotti Sr. or not, because I think he was a rotten boss. Okay. And not that I think through history it's proven he's a rotten boss. But you'll see me walking out of his house on the A&E tape, coming out of his house. So that's the first falsity by the Gotti faction. Yeah. Second, I'm picking up Gotti Sr. from court. That is a famous magazine, Vanity Fair, where I'm picking up from court. So why is this guy that doesn't know me getting in a car with me? I says, and we're pulled over by maybe 30, 40 cameramen because they think I got a gun on me. And they attacked the car, the police, and Jerry Shalgal's in that picture, I'm in the picture, and Gotti's son, Junior's in the picture. So that's the second. There's a tape that presented at court with me and Gotti Sr. outside the Ravenite Club in Manhattan. There's an opening statement by the Gambino captain, Ronnie One-Arm Trucchio, who says I am the John Gotti Jr.'s partner in the drug business and his partner over the last 20 years. That's his opening statement. He made that comment about 8 times in a row in that statement, if you get the opening statement. And then my ex-wife, who's best friends with John Gotti Jr.'s wife, Kim, makes a statement recently and put a letter up on Facebook saying that me and her spent every weekend with Gotti Sr. at Altadonna's with the rest of their family. Wow. And we'd have dinner once a week with the family there. For the most part, we were there weekly. And every holiday, whether it was Christmas Eve, New Year's, we're at the house. I mean, the problem with the Gotti's nonsense is the jealousy and the insecurity hasn't stopped over the years. So there's just too many guys that are out there and that know the truth.
Well, another thing was, and it's kind of along this thread, is that you weren't that close with John Jr. That, don't get me wrong, I don't think anybody disputes you had some connection with him. There's photos with them. You probably served, let's call it what it is, you served as an enforcer for him. I don't believe anybody disputes that. But I got some shit about, it was pretty heavy, on public and privately, not saying any names, because I wouldn't, if you said something to me and I wasn't allowed to say, I wouldn't protect your identity. But publicly and privately, that you weren't that close to John at all.
Well, I was close with John Jr. from 1982 to 92, 93.
10 years, okay.
About that 10-year reign. The reign that his whole family gets straightened out, kill Paul, become bosses, made guys. And about 92, we have a falling out. And I said it during some court proceedings. We had a bad marriage. But I still work for the Gambino family.
You went to Tampa, correct?
I went to, yeah. Well, no, I didn't live in Tampa. That's not true. Okay. I went to Tampa on business. So did John Gotti Jr.
There's one of the allegations was they chased you out of New York.
No, it's ridiculous. He comes to Tampa with me.
Yeah.
My partner at the time was Timmy Donovan. Okay. Junior comes there, flies in, meets him. Timmy Donovan, on Junior's permission, ends up testifying against me. Junior tells him to testify against me. Yeah. And he testifies for Junior. You know, so he takes guys like Robert Lamidola, he tells them to testify against me, and he gets statements for him. He gave them permission. Well, he's lining up people to testify against me. So the nonsense is, the reason why he's talking like that is because we had a plot to kill him. And, you know, in 94 that started. We were going to try to hit him. In 95, the end of 95.
You guys were going to kill John Jr.?
John Jr. 95, we were going to hit him. It's part of documents also.
And who's we?
Me, Charles Caniglia, Johnny Caniglia from jail. Nicky Carrazzo.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of follow what I understand. So at that time, he is at least a captain, correct?
At that time he's an acting boss.
He's acting boss.
He's an acting boss.
And you mentioned some names that I understand are in administration, right? And you being a non-made member. So basically some guys got together, made a non-made, and said, hey, we want to knock out a boss. Similar to what happened to Castellano.
He's not a boss. He's not recognized. The Genovese family's not recognizing him. The Lucchese family's not recognizing him. He's not recognizing him. Within our own family, they want to recognize him. That's okay. For me, I didn't recognize him either. By 94, I start telling him, this guy's not going to tell me what to do anymore. I said, so I was on board. We had plenty of meetings, me and Gotti, where we were going to hit him at Aqueduct Racetrack, me and my 2 cousins. Yeah. That didn't go because he didn't come back out the door we wanted to. 95.
Oh, wow. So you guys made physical attempts and just never carried through.
Yeah. In 95, we go back out trying to hit him again. And that's with the backing of Charles Koenig gave me a machine gun and a 9mm. And he asked me to kill him. He asked me to kill him, Carmine Agnello, and Pete Gotti. And the regime that was running the Gambino family and trying to take it over, which a legitimate gangster was Nicky Carrazzo. And he wasn't going to sit for a spoiled punk kid with no crew to tell him what to do on the streets. So that move was a legitimate move. Andrew DiDonato wrote about it in his book.
Okay. So I'm assuming this is all public information.
Yeah, it's public information. I mean, I discussed it in trial.
Okay.
I discussed that this guy was ratting in 2005, and he tried to change that rhetoric.
That was the other thing. So I don't believe, and I don't have the facts in front of me, but the information that I got is that he fed bullshit information or fed mis or disinformation to the to federal agents.
Well, I'll tell you this: if he was going to do that, why did he do a YouTube in his own name saying he ratted? He was weak, and then about a month later he took that YouTube down. And then the same thing he says, well, I was only giving him some information against my enemies. So you can't change your storyline 5 times. And he never even brought it out until his papers, his 302 Queen of the Day papers were put inside my book.
What profit said?
What's your profit? Now, some of the things that is facts. In 2005, he's an informant, government informant, Queen of the Day. 2006, his lawyers filed papers. His life was in danger from the Gambino family trying to kill him and other families trying to kill him.
Informants or what?
Well, he was saying he was feeding information. We don't know what he was actually saying, but he's feeding information. If he didn't give this information and other families knew about this, why wasn't anybody informed? The Genovese family wouldn't meet with him, wouldn't accept that nonsense. And the last thing is he said he retired in 1998. So if you retired, how'd you reach out to anybody to tell them that you're gonna go in and cooperate?
Now, the only thing though is, and this would have led, because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I wanted to clarify some points for our readers. The last one was that you testified at his trials and were deemed a non-credible witness.
That's another, this is what the Gottis do is put out rhetoric to change the narrative from him being a rat, him being an informant, him going for Queen of the Day, to try to make somebody answer to their nonsense. So, Cosa Nostra News wrote about this. That was the Gotti, had one juror say that for them, who took them out to dinner, that was infatuated with the Gottis. When you do the jury, when you do the jury pool of all the charges, you'll see that's not true. That's just a lie. So some of the charges was 9-3, but that's still not the storyline. The storyline was, I don't care if they believed me or didn't believe me. That's 10, 12 jurors, but they happen to believe me. So the storyline is I'm testifying against a guy that was already giving up information against me, the Gambino family, and other families, the Philadelphia mob, and anybody else he could talk about.
But this was at a time, though, well, we talked about this, I believe, on the first interview, and we talked about it offline. When was like kind of the mob really strong, and then, would it be 90s, whatever, when did it die down? And then why did they put up with this nonsense? Why did administrators kind of respectfully, I don't want anybody to get killed, but it just seems that like the old days this never would have happened. So when did things die down, and when did all this come about?
Well, you got to remember, see, I don't know, here's the bottom line is this: if the mob, for them to put up with what Gotti did and go in and as the Queen of the Day and not kill him, hurt him, or chase him, do something to him to show power, they showed nothing. So as my way of thinking, the way I grew up in the mob world, I don't have respect for him. They allowed that guy to do that. So when guys tell me, well, you're publicly out there speaking about, helping kids and you're against the street. Obviously, if they can't take care of business with Gotti going in, and he's a made guy, and he's one of their own, and I'm supposed to be an outsider Albanian that stepped in and strong-armed the Italian mob. Well, why would I have fear against guys that can't take care of this guy? This is a guy that's running around as a crime fighter these days. And this is a guy that was involved with their uncle, Vinny Gotti, with a rape murder. So when they're allowing these things to happen and they're okay with it, I got to say to myself, well, I guess the mob's not too strong. Because when they shut this guy down for the way he talks and the way he behaves, and this is going on over a decade.
Well, my understanding, and again, going by what I read, and I read Eddie's Cosa Nostra News over time, kind of the Gambinos and the Genoveses, and it's rooted back to Luciano, rooted back to like Gambino, that these were the two families that have always been historically strong. And my understanding is, although the mob is not nearly where it was, the Genovese are still very strong. You don't hear a lot of rats, you don't hear a lot going on, you don't hear much about them. But in that world, they're very strong, and the Gambinos are not as strong. What did the Genovese do right? It seemed like the Gambinos had a lot of infighting and a lot of things wrong. What did the Genovese do?
Well, if you read the book that I think is Larry McShane, if I'm correct, wrote that book about the Genovese family, and talks about the strengths and talks about what they thought of Gotti and the reign of the Gambino family, which they basically say they were useless, and Gotti had a big mouth, and they were going to kill him. The Genovese family is known to be very quiet, respected because they're quiet. They're very underground. People don't know who's made, who isn't, who's the boss, who is, and they run their family with like a tight ship. The Gambino family, under the reign of Gotti Sr., ran it like a street gang, just like I said. This is a degenerate gambler. His son's a punky kid that has no respect from anybody. And this is one of the biggest things with Gotti Jr., even what he's doing now with the Girl Scout stuff on a warrior and a computer. He wasn't capable as a street guy. He's not capable now. So he went to typewritings now. And it's almost to the fact of, if you're trying to talk about your father, you're embarrassing that name, if there was any kind of name at all to talk about. At this point, his actions with the people he's staying with guys like this kid, Chris Casparoso, it's a fake name, his name's Chris George. His family, you know, everybody, he leaves addresses. He's a wealthy kid that doesn't work. His mother pays his phone bill. He's out in Huntington. So, you know, this is a kid that has nothing better to do with his time but follow Gotti, and Gotti feels secure around these guys. Or a guy like this kid Jeff that does these radio podcasts with no job, and you know he's not working, and so he's got 4 or 5 really bottom of the pit guys that are staying with him day and night. He resorted to that. He wasn't respected on the street then. He ain't certainly not respected at all now. So he doesn't know what to do with himself, but feels secure by staying with very weak people. People see that. I says, and you know, he was never known as anything on the street from anybody. He can never have that respect. As hard as he tries to get that respect, and he's a weak guy that knocks his father from pillow to post, but yet he tries to extort money off the father's name. So this is the same guy that's crying, your father put me in that life. And he's trying to be somewhat of a, I don't know what he's trying to be at this point.
Well, you grew up in a unique situation because you know, kind of 80s, maybe late 70s, right? Still a young guy, but you caught kind of like the super heyday guys. Like Carla just died, you know, some big guys were still around. The 80s were still kind of knocking around, the 90s had died. But then also those guys had connections to major guys like back in the day. So I gotta ask this, who do you rank as the top 3 gangsters of all time? Gangsters of all time. Italian, non-Italian, just give me the top.
Well, I've always said Jimmy Burke to me was a gang.
Oh, wow, from Goodfellas, yeah.
Well, you know, I was very good friends with his son, Frankie, before he got killed. And I think Jimmy was what you would say is a gangster, right? Nice guy, Jimmy the Gent Burke, right? They named him that because he was a gentleman. But if you crossed the guy, you got a problem with the guy because he was a gangster. He didn't, you know, when I love when everybody acts like this guy was, you know, just the movie portrays a mad dog killer. That's really not accurate. He killed people, in my opinion, when you're in that life, that deserve to be killed.
Number 2?
Number 2, I would say a guy like Frank Costello.
Oh, wow, a gentleman.
Again, a gentleman, and you know.
Cocktail party society.
Yes. So, you know, you got guys that image of a gangster were low-key guys like that, were gentlemen, and, you know, they dressed the part, they stayed with some good people, you know, they knew how to mix in the real world. And I would say Bruno from down in Philly.
Bruno, Gentle Don.
So, you know, these guys, I mean, I could go on with that list. I think Carlo Gambino, I left him out, which would be, you know, but I think everybody knows Carlo already. So maybe I put Carlo on the top of that list. But, you know, a guy like Angelo, again, because these are gentlemen, these guys are quiet guys that are, they're gangsters.
You prefer to make money over war.
Yeah, but that is the way to, if you're going to be on the street, really that's the example you're going to set. I mean, God. You
didn't know New York modern bosses in your top 3?
No, because I think the way they handle business, even now with the way Gotti's talking, nobody shuts them down. So you would think the kid's a little brat. I says, this behavior is embarrassing to anybody. Forget about streaking. Nobody acts like this as a man. The kids that he got run around from, like a Casparosa, a fake name, they supposed to act like this. They don't know any better. A little bratty kid from, money in his pocket. He's going to act like a little girl. I mean, that's expected. But a Gotti, this is what the way they act, and nobody's shutting them down. Where's the mob? Where's the mob to give them that warning?
Yeah, so you have a bestseller in the can already with Gotti's Rules. What should we expect from Darkest Hours in this first part of your trilogy that was not in Gotti?
Well, I'm going to dive back into the second book of really more of the violence.
Okay. And
what happened, the third book will be me running, going to about 20 different countries, connections with mob bosses.
Yeah, because you were like, real quick, but getting away from the Italian mob, if you were in Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, like you were juiced into cartels and other mafias.
The cartel moved me around when I was on the run.
So how did you get hooked up with?
Well,
it's not a small thing. You don't just knock on the bodega and get hooked up with a local cartel boss.
You got to remember something. I wasn't more of an international guy. These guys are local guys. They don't leave their neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was in the drug business, so I was in drug business from Europe for years. Wow. I was in Mexico. I was in these areas. I had connections in different areas. I had connections with different street gangs. When some of these guys, people really don't understand. They don't have the outreach. I'm right now well known in every country around the world. There's a reason for that, and one of the reasons for that is because I always treated people right. I might have been aggressive towards the people that screwed with me, but anybody that was around with me knew we made money together, we had fun together, we socialized, and it was more about living. I live. That kid still doesn't live, Gotti. He doesn't leave his neighborhood. He doesn't go anywhere. Has no friends, no social life, no clothes. He dresses like a, so these are the things, these insecurities about this guy will make this guy for the rest of his life look in the mirror and want to be me. He ain't going to change that because he doesn't have anything going for him.
You guys hate each other. Is there any?
I'm going to tell you why. I'll cut you off why I hate him. I'm the first guy I don't respect a guy that acts like this.
Yeah.
Forget about it. If you just shut your mouth and act like a man, I would tell you I don't like him, but that's it. Move it on.
Is there any chance for, let's just say their camp calls me after this interview. I doubt they will, but let's say they call me up and say, Tom, I'm willing to sit down with John, publicly or privately, bury the hatchet, we're both gentlemen, and let's just kind of swear this away. Do you think that will ever happen?
That punk, and I'm going to say that word very good, that punk, I would never be his friend, never respect him, never like him. Didn't like him then.
But if he came back to the table, you'd just sit down with him?
Never. Okay. I got nothing to say to this guy.
Wow,
To me, he should wear a skirt everywhere he goes. Everything my father taught me about trying to be a man and behave like a man and be a gentleman, this guy has never learned one thing. And there's one thing about his father would never act like this. His father would never put up with this. And if his father was home and alive, he would chop his head off for this behavior like a little girl. It's more than disgusting the way this guy acts. Wow. And any kid that watches this, you don't have to be a gangster, you don't have to be a CEO, you could be a lawyer, you could be a construction worker. Yeah. There's nobody's gonna respect this behavior like a child. This is worse than a little Girl Scout. I never seen anything in my life. No one has, to this extent, that a guy runs around the way he does, like a bitch. There's no other word for this guy.
Wow.
And there's one regret I tell everybody ever before I change my life. I said, and I'll always say it, I wish I took his head off back then. I said, and I'll always regret that. I says, and then I would make my peace with God back then. I says, but the guy's no good. I says, because he doesn't act like a man. And that's really, I'm not saying anything that everybody in the world's not watching. Yeah. I says, because this behavior is just so disgusting. And he's teaching kids to do this nonsense. This is what you want to do as an adult, try to teach these kids what? That this is what you do? You stay behind a computer and you got a couple of bucks and you throw it at guys. You got to remember one thing this guy has done. And I make it very public because so people know and everybody over there knows. This guy's filed papers.
Okay, finish the sentence.
This guy's filed papers to every government agency that I'm going to. Tom, you got to understand, the guy's a weasel. The guy will never sit with anybody. The guy hides behind walls and fake names and fake computers and fake Twitters. He's not a man. No man does this at this age. Forget about a gangster. I mean, the guy's behavior is a child, a brat, a bitch, everything I said. This guy has filed papers with the United States government. He filed them with my parole officer, my parole officer's boss, my judge, everybody that I'm going to kill him, he says. He has people filing cases against me.
He said that John Alite is going to kill me?
Yes, and he asked guys on his behalf, he hired his attorneys, one was my brother at one time, and he asked him also to say that he heard me say I was going to kill him, and he told my brother the same. I know he's going to kill me, you need to sign these papers for me so I can have him locked up. He also asked the guy, Jeff, that's suing me on his behalf with his attorney also. He brings his attorneys, defamation.
Okay.
Now, this is a guy that works for...
Nothing bad because you don't need any more.
No, I don't. Not, I don't have anything. I don't have any issue. The issue is with Gotti hiring people to harass me. He's hiring people to come by the house and stalk me. He's hiring people to write on computers. He's writing on computers on fake names. This is child behavior, Girl Scout behavior. How can I respect anybody that does this?
Wow. These are tough words. John, so listen, so how can we find this book? I'm assuming Amazon?
Yeah, that Amazon, I guarantee you, John Gotti Jr.'s got it in his house. Call him up and ask him if he read it yet.
So on Amazon and I'm assuming Barnes & Noble and the usual places.
Yes.
So look out for The Darkest Hour, former Mafia enforcer for John Gotti and the Gambino crime.
It's you could go on my website, johnalidarkesthour.com.
Okay, and then one last thing is, and we're going to be talking a lot more because you're a friend of the theory. What's some of the advice you have to younger folks listening to this? Because I have to say, even though the mob has waned down, there's other type of kids in different neighborhoods and backgrounds that will get hooked up with a gang, an MS-13, a Blood, a Crip, etc. To me, it's all the same shit. A gangster's a gangster in a sense, right? Maybe they might come from a different culture or background, but it's the same shit, and they're not great people. What do you say to that person who's thinking of joining a gang and getting involved in that life?
Lou Romano is a writer and a friend of mine, and he's written a book called Zip Codes, and that's exactly what it discusses. The area, it's kids that are from different aspects of life and areas. And my message is simply positive message. There's so many ways to live a right life and to follow a right path. Go to school, become a truck driver, become a construction worker, become an attorney, an engineer, a ball player. But go to do, life's short, right? Live the right way, have fun, enjoy your life, get married, have kids, whatever you want to do, whatever your passions are, travel, but don't live the street life. There's nothing but pain.
Here's something interesting, I'm going to give a quick plug, is we are working closely with Disrupt Digital, and they're actually setting up coding schools in Puerto Rico. They identified Puerto Rico as a place where there was kids who were just kind of underserved in terms of tech, and they're opening a school there because they believe that's going to be the next tech haven. They're also doing some great stuff in Newark and the inner city. So I think even coding, believe it or not, if you catch somebody at a young age and they're willing to put in the work, I know it sounds
no, because I don't know that. I'm not from that word.
But that might for young kids.
But the thing is, it's a positive direction.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of the reasons I got anger towards the Gotti and his little minions, because look at the negative living they're doing. Look at the negative. Everything they do is negative. Nothing positive. Not trying to teach kids anything. And he's trying to sell a fairy tale. It's nonsense. The guy's a weak guy. That's every action about his life is weak. Listen, you got to say it because it needs to be out there. This guy needs to be embarrassed for the way he behaves. And the weak people he keeps around him is just that, because he's so weak. He can't come forward and sit in front of anybody. He can't talk about his 302. He hasn't mentioned it once, anywhere live with anybody. Let you ask those questions. You go see him. He won't let you ask him because he's weak and he's scared and he can't shoulder anything he's ever done in his life.
Wow. So these are, I think you've talked fairly strongly about him in the past. I follow you on your press jaunts. You've been on shows and so forth. And I have to say this might have been the strongest you've ever spoken about him. Because
over the years, this guy hasn't stopped. He's obsessed with me, jealous of me, and I told you the reasons why. I could go through a laundry list of things. But the guy won't go on that show. Let you ask those questions live. But he'll want it on his home ground. He won't let you ask those questions. Yeah. He wants his lawyer next to him. He's just a weak guy that can never stand in front.
So you're my guy. You know that. I'm friends with you, but I have no problem asking you this question. Does this little beef sell you more books? Come on. If I mention his name, you might sell a few more books.
He's got I'm going to tell you what. If his father was sitting here, yeah, it would. Him? He's got no following, nothing. That's what all he does do is talk about me and his father. Go look on YouTube, go look at my shows, go follow him. Everything he does, he tries to attach himself to me or his father because he's not a man. Everybody understands that.
Well, listen, John Alite, Darkest Hour, first part of a 3-part series. SC Pike, John, listen, as always, thank you for being on the podcast.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.